Welcome to Parallel Perspectives, conversations with leaders who don't just think differently, they build differently. I'm Nathan Trail, and you know something that's really rare to find is someone who can diagnose a car engine, fight fires at 2 a.m., and show up Monday morning to lead digital transformation at the world's largest battery manufacturer. Mike Conley didn't take the traditional path to CIO. He spent 6 years as a traveling consultant, lived through corporate buyouts and banking, volunteered as a firefighter for 3 decades. Somewhere in there, he figured out that technical depth matters less than knowing how to make people comfortable with change. And that sometimes the skills that matter most come from places that have nothing to do with IT. This one is different. Mike, welcome to Parallel Perspectives. We're excited to have you.
Thank you, Nathan.
So let's start with the early years. Take us back to the beginning of your career. How did you get started in technology, and what were those early years like?
Yeah, so, actually, when I was 18, computer was not in my vision. Even college wasn't. I was an ASE certified mechanic. But at that time, really technology was embedding itself in vehicles. So I had a kind of fork in the road. I either take college and down a computer path, or I studied dedicated computers and cars. And I opted to go left instead of right. That's kind of where it started. I've always had a passion for technology in general, but this was, I would say, a thwarted effort to go, okay, let's get a degree, and this is what it'll be in. And walking out of college there, with very little knowledge on, we'll say, the way the world really worked in IT, but spent my first 6 years as a consultant, which I love.
That's cool. So you spent time as a consultant, and my understanding from our previous conversations is you've traveled a lot to different countries during that time, which is pretty cool. So, two questions in that. What drew you to that work initially, and what was your top 2 or 3 countries that you visited and why?
Yeah. So what really drew me to consulting at the time, really, the internet wasn't what it is today. So you're going to get jobs by word of mouth, right? Blind applying all over. And really, when we came out of college, the only thing they kind of argue with was, here are some local agencies, right? So kind of ended up there. But what really did attract me was the potential of not having a singular job, meaning I can go from architecture to network architecture, et cetera. So that was intriguing. Although I would say in my early stages, I had no clue on what really that meant. It just sounded intriguing. But that gave me a lot of opportunity to really build a wealth of knowledge and experience and learn from others that I work with. And I would say, as far as the second part of your question, what countries were the most enjoyable to visit or unique? I did spend some time in Poland. I spent some time in Germany. And I would say Germany was the most interesting by far. I got to, it was my first time to Germany. I both spent time in Düsseldorf, which was interesting because a lot of the where we're getting our beer from, right? At the end of the day, hops is made there. So, and it was like seeing two different cultures because I was up in Munich, very city-like, right? Really, and I did get to ride the Autobahn. I did not drive at the time. The CIO drove me around a bit, but yeah, so it was very enjoyable. Culture was wonderful. Just got really acclimated to kind of having two different, and it was a short ride. You're talking about 4.5 hours, maybe 5 hours, and just a difference in both culture, from a personality perspective inside the city area, and also just restaurant eating. So I got to experience quite a bit. So I loved my time there. I spent about a week and a half, roughly to 2 weeks, just in that country alone.
That's cool. And it's funny you say it your favorite country based on some things that someone in their 20s would definitely base it on, beer and schnitzel and the Audubon. So I probably would have said the exact same thing. Germany is a really cool country. And so after that phase of your life, Mike, when did you start to think about settling down and finding something a little more permanent, and kind of what drove that? thread of decisions in your life. Yeah.
Not that travel wears on you, but it can. But certainly, I think I would establish a relationship, and it's great being a consultant. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to cast shade on that at all. It got me where I was, where I am even today in my career. It was a wonderful journey, but really, I wanted to be a little bit more homebound, right? I wanted to start looking for a house, et cetera. Those weren't in the cards. I barely stayed any time in my apartment at the time. I'm like, okay, let's
Yeah.
settle. So that kind of shifted. So really, I started aggressively looking at localized jobs here in Berks County, Pennsylvania, and ended up landing a job with Sovereign Bank, which eventually became Santander, and I was there for that transition.
Oh, cool. Okay. So a lot of kind of settling roots. Like you said, you did land in Berks County. You've actually, built, personally and career-wise, a very extensive network in that area of Pennsylvania and outside of Philly. So how does that happen? And I'm asking this question also keeping in mind young tech executives and tech managers trying to build their career. How did you build that extensive network, and how is that early stage part of landing in Berks kind of build your career and shape your career?
Yeah, so there was, we'll say in the 90s and early 2000s, right? It was, like I said, the internet wasn't what it was or what it is today. But more importantly was just kind of establishing, I knew sales guys, I knew technical sales, right? I also had multiple positions while I was a consultant, right? I did technical project management. I did technical sales. It varied all over the place. But what that really exposed me to was a ton of organizations, not to mention, competition, right? I'll say there was, 6 or 7 key players in the county. They all kind of had their own businesses or whatever. So you kind of got to know the players real quick. Which is interesting is how would that translate today, right? Like that could still happen, right? Somebody can still do consulting and still pick up that leverage. They're a little bit larger organizations now, maybe not so small, mom and pop. But genuinely speaking, I'm part of a organization called Set Fire that actually mentors.
Set fire.
Yeah,
Set fire. Okay.
yeah, Set Fire. It's an actual mentoring organization
Oh, cool.
that it's one of this gentleman's Ted's his bucket list. He said, "I'm going to help people get into IT, and it's specific to IT." So I'm actually mentoring an individual actually in Texas who goes to Louisiana, and it's normally college based. It kind of gives them what I was fortunate enough to have in the late 90s, early 2000s. It gives that opportunity, like, who do you know, right? And kind of engage those folks and then get them those kind of introductions, those contacts, and also just advise them, like, on I won't say, people don't have lofty ambitions. Everyone does. Sometimes it's a little problematic when you think about, well, is that even possible to do? And we kind of advise them what's realistic, what can happen day one, what can happen, day 365 in this first year, and what does that look like? So we kind of help them with that. So it's a year-long endeavor normally with 1 or 2 that you.
That's great. Yeah. I think it's important that you have that a more in depth over a long period of time, just versus just quick speed dating when it comes to mentoring, because the first is just very surface. What do you want to do with your life? What can I help you with? That type of stuff. But as you build that relationship with a mentee to a mentor, the richness of the amount that the amount of investment becomes richer. So even though maybe it's an hour at a time, it's a more rich in-depth experience for the mentee. So I really love that. That's something that you kind of have as a side thing. I'm very curious. Early days. So you personally have been a part of the NRI family, previously Core BTS, for a long time and have had relationships here. So you can certainly mention names, but tell me a story, early days, how many years ago and who, and about your experiences with NRI and some of the leadership here.
Yeah. So, wow, if we go back, I mean, NRI, the players that are there today and where they all came from, right? So you have to kind of traverse back the clock a bit, right? To WorldNet, and there were other organizations at GE Capital. Where did they all come from, and how did they ended up at NRI? And if we go back to all the way back, there was really two players that were engaged in this, which at the time was DSS, which is my consulting firm I work for, and then a competitor, which was at the time Ameridata and was forged into GE Capital at that time. There were a lot of players there, right? So, Bob Sensink was one of them, Gary Scheib being the other. I actually was working on a project called Realm that was to convert Meridian Bank over to core state systems. Spent a number of months on that, but realized, and this was my very first gig out of college, right? Literally just a contractor, manpower kind of thing, right? Just hanging in there. No health insurance, right? The bottom of the barrel. Like, what am I doing, right?
You were the mentee.
Yeah, exactly,
in
totally.
a sense.
But I tried to focus on, okay, how do I land a more permanent gig, right? And I pushed there quite a bit. It was just not in the cards, just because we were all kind of project based. So I ended up actually landing a job at DSS. Walked in and kind of gave my 2-week notice, and the PM just went ballistic.
Oh wow!
Which it happens, right? Like, oh no, and it was really more in a panic state, and it came out. And my first experience was literally how I first met Gary Scheib and Bob Sensink. They didn't know who I was downstairs, right in the lab. Like, who's this guy? And they heard the commotion, right? And they came out. And they're like, "You all right? Yeah, I'm totally fine. Don't worry about it." Like, I just let it roll off, right? Like, young at that time, I was 20, 22. Yeah. So
wow.
I don't think anything really fazed me. Like, oh, is this important or not? But yeah, it did start my transition into that 6-year career of being consulting and traveling. So it was a good move, but I never really lost those players that were involved along that way, both in Realm and whatnot. And Ashley, who really mentored me during that time, Charlie Theater guy, who was unfortunately he's passed, but he really smart guy. We're going back to MetaFrame before Citrix was a thing. Really smart guy, and he really helped me kind of and helped me get moving in my career. Like, don't wait, you got to take opportunity. So I guess my Set Fire program, what I'm trying to participate in, is a way to mimic that, right? I really looked up to Charlie for a long time. So yeah.
I love that. And you mentioned Bob Sensenig's name. Bob is still here. He's a legend. He that's one story about Bob and his legendary fingerprints on this company. There's probably 20 or 30 others. For those of you who don't know, Bob is one of our vice presidents of sales, based up there in that area of Philly. So, I'm curious about East Penn Manufacturing specifically. So, follow the roadmap through your career. How did you end up at East Penn specifically?
Yeah, so I've had multiple jobs, over the years. I really, I was in the financial district for about 13 years of my career, and I loved it. Nothing wrong with it. Didn't like the threat of buyout, right? Banks always came with that, so it was a little tenuous. So really, I looked towards other opportunities, and I really did I like taking things apart, right? That whole kind of, so manufacturing really started to, and I didn't realize it at the time, really appealed to me. So I started to dabble into that area and really tried to focus in on a company that produced something, right? Not to say that, banks don't get me wrong. Banks are lovely and we need them, right? But at the end of the day, I wanted to contribute to something. So that's kind of how I landed and eventually landed at East Penn, was to focus and stay in that manufacturing space. I did work at 2 other manufacturers, IFM Effector and Avantor Performance Materials, over the years, but really did land at East Penn. And what I was really trying to recreate, which was interesting, I had spent such a long time at Sovereign Santander Bank. I was really trying to recreate that. I was looking for a home. I was not looking for just another job opportunity, right? Because I could kind of differentiate, is this a consulting gig, or is this really where I can see myself, retiring, or at least 10, 20 years, whatever. So I was really honing in on that. And East Penn brought that. to the table. So I'm the vice president of information technologies, but
VP of IT.
yeah,
Okay.
from a title perspective, yeah. But I've been there now 7 years. So
Okay.
yeah, and so when I started though, it was definitely the landscape looked very different than what it does today.
Sure. So in order to move from where you were into, effectively what the CIO is, the VP of IT, were there specific experiences or stories through that transition period that prepared you for this position of leadership?
Yeah. So really, what I at Sovereign Bank, and I applaud them for this. Early on, I knew I wanted to do some level of leadership, or at least wanted to expand. Right. Being a consultant for 6 years, walking into a bank, I knew everything. Right. I could fix it. Like, you
Of
just
course.
right. Come on. Like and I was that individual, and I knew that wasn't a longevity thing. Right. How do I change that attitude? So for like about 5 years, they really groomed me. They sent me to leadership training, right? Understanding, um, you know, before it was DISC, right? Profiling, well, like
Yeah.
what kind of personality, so you can kind of be emotional intelligence, self-awareness, right? That is where I think I really started to understand, okay, stop being a putz. How do I participate as a team, right? And how do I really help the company move forward, right? So that's where I think I really kind of picked it up, and taking those skills helped dramatically with East Penn. East Penn, when I walked into, unfortunately, a little bit of a technology deficit. Um, and IT was not really modernized, not really, what's wonderful about East Penn, we've been in business for 80 years. A lot of opportunities, but also change sometimes comes hard, right? That's when you've done it for so long, been successful, that's difficult. So there were some legacy systems there and things of that nature. So how to break those molds, and I think that's one thing that kind of helped me understanding how I'm coming across, emotional intelligence, and also just dealing with change management.
I love the influence on emotional intelligence, and you mentioned the DISC uh,
Yeah,
program. Actually, it's still around today. I'm actually
yeah,
going through it with some of my leaders as we speak. The DISC program. Where do you fall on the wheel of
yeah.
DISC? Do you remember?
I am an ID.
ID. I've actually got it pulled up. Funny enough, I have it open. Okay, so influence with
Yeah,
a hint of dominance. So
yes, yes,
um,
yes.
let's read it. Influence, charm and enthusiasm, sociability, optimism, and talkativeness. That sounds about like Michael Connolly there.
Yes,
So,
yes. I would
well,
think
that's pretty
Bob
cool.
shares that, to be fair. Bob Sands.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I land in right smack in the middle of D. So
Yeah,
dominance, which is self confidence, directiveness, forcefulness, and risk taking. So
yeah.
pros and cons, I think, to all of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Throughout your career, you've had a lot of different technical roles. But early on, you were in the consulting space. You've landed up in as an IT leader.
Yeah.
So from one to the other, which consulting's probably a little less technical, you're back into a position of being a little less technical. But Mike Conley himself is very technical.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you built that level of depth and why it matters for leadership.
Yeah. So, one of the things I really thought about, if I was going to be a leader, and, going through being a consultant, I was, an MCSE, like, 6 times over, right? I did all that Microsoft bed. I was CCNA, the whole 9 yards. And it was just due to demand, right? Where was the demand, right? Proxy 2.0, surf control, things that, checkpoint firewall, all of those things, right, were all needed by customers. So I learned those assets. But the one thing I really took away from that was fantastic was I learned, started out like desk side support, moved to server, moved to networking, voice over IP. I actually did a product for those that are old enough that listen to Cisco IPTV. It was literally a
Oh,
broadcast system way back in the day, very low consumption of bandwidth, those types of things. And that really kind of changed my approach on my thinking process, right? From a leadership, like what I found is if you have a breadth of knowledge across, you don't need to be a subject matter expert in all of it, but having that breadth, you bring something new to the table, which means you can have folks talk shop. you can also get to a strategic level, right? Let's not get into the weeds of how we're working with VoIP, or what, but more importantly is, can I set a strategic direction and understand how those boots on the ground are going to need to deliver that, right? And I think that also kind of goes almost side by side with my disc, right? I'm worried about how this is going to impact the employee and understand what they're capable of, right? So I think that's where it's very important to understand the dynamics and also understand from a technology perspective, if you don't have that, I would say even somewhat breadth of knowledge, it's very difficult to challenge your staff thinking outside of the box, right? They're just coming to you with a solution, you're yaying or naying it. It's, are you offering a little something? Did you think about X? Did you think about Y? What is the other what's competition in that space look like, right? Are you really challenging them? And not to say that leaders can't. I just found that it's made my job so much easier understanding that technical.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what makes you very unique, Mike, is you not only have awareness of, your leadership styles, and you practice and make mistakes in emotional intelligence variances and learn from those mistakes on top of the foundational technology and, your level of technical depth that you have. Those two combined almost makes you perfect for the role you're in today. And I think what a lot of young, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, what a lot of young, hungry, um, technologists, whether they're, following a technical path or following more of the business path, forget that it takes time to build that foundation. It doesn't happen overnight by watching a few YouTube channels, right? You can gain information, but
Absolutely.
how to now marry that with, enabling a business and, the strategy behind business decisions, it's a lot tougher to do by learning things overnight versus building that over, tens and 20 years. So, you know, I'm curious your perspective on kind of having built that foundation and leading to where you are today.
Yeah, I think what I started to understand, I would say early and even maybe mid career is, and I took this approach of, do I understand the market space, right? Well, what's going on in IT in general, right? Not from a consulting or selling perspective, but do I know what's coming out there? And really, and can I prepare for that? How do we get ahead of the curve? Because really, technology is an enablement for the business, right? We need to enable the business. That's what drives, if you're not just in technology, if you're manufacturing, whatever you're doing, you need to enable that business line. And really, I started to research that quite a bit, right? So, and I actually took a hold of Intel, right? Intel works on this tick tock premise, right? So, left side, they make a major improvement and actually
Yeah.
announce a new product. The next year, right, they're focused on just improving that, right? We're going from
Yeah.
2.4 gigahertz to 2.5 gigahertz, something similar to that. So what was interesting, it started to become like almost like predictable. Okay, well, if they do tick and tock and kind of apply that, like how do you introduce something new, improve on it, and then move on, right? Like how do you, so it became secular. In addition to, I lived through enough from an experience perspective now, right? Everybody centralized, decentralized technology, right? What, and how people consume that. And you're going to start to see this more. And I'm curious on if, I'm seeing AI even come now to local data centers, right? There was this big
Yeah.
boom, et cetera, right? Everybody's got to build, but, part of the challenge there is, besides natural resources, water, or even having electricity, really boils down to is there's a safety security aspect to it as well. But is there these one-offs now that you're going to start doing on-prem? Is that the tick of that, right? From an Intel
Yeah.
perspective, is that it? I don't know, but we're trying to prepare for that, right? To understand how that plays out, right? What are we going to look for locally? Because I think if we look at all localized data centers that are out there that people still have on-prem, still maintain, right, for whatever
Yeah.
reasons, there's opportunity there. So how do you prepare for that, and how do you kind of crystal ball that?
Yeah. That's an interesting topic is AI coming back to the data center and away from the cloud. We've started to see a small trend as well around, as chips get cheaper, right? As chips get more inexpensive, is there going to be a shift in what that looks like? We now have a practice that's really focused around AI ready data centers. So it's around how AI is starting to move back to the edge. And so, it's an interesting phenomenon that, we'll see where it goes. Things are shifting so fast right now. It's hard to, for any, even integrators to keep up with what's going on. So it'll be an interesting shift in technology over the next 2 to 3 years, I think.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'd like to see what happens in like 2030. What does that look like? It's going to be very different than today, right?
That's right. That's right. Let's talk about East Penn Manufacturing a little bit more. Can you help us understand what specifically does East Penn do, and where and what within the industry? So what does East Penn do, and where is that industry heading?
Yeah, so really, and we'll boil it down to, yes, we produce batteries. We're an energy storage company, right? So we produce anything from automotive, truck, railroad, even into government work, right? Department of Defense. We also enable motive power, right? So how is your Amazon product, right, going to hit you, right? Those are all either lead acid or lithium ion. We are in both We are in both spaces. I would say, though, by far, we lean on our lead acid, which has served us well over the last, 75 years that we've been in business. But we do have a lithium ion offering as well. That's been the main focus. We haven't looked and haven't swayed into diversifying from energy storage. But in addition to that, we provide services and obviously batteries, but services along with that to really hydro plants, right? Or even to the point of we're going to put in a data center, right? Microsoft or an Amazon, right? We will provide battery backup storage facilities to those entities. And where is it going? And I'm curious on this: is our battery technologies changing? Absolutely, right? Lithium ion's been it's gotten some bad press, right? Particularly over the last several years, right? Can't have e-bikes inside apartment buildings, right? In New York, there are other forms of that, right? That are in play. So, and where do we take that? Is lead acid going away? And I get that question a lot, right? Is lithium, right? Are you going to focus on? We are focused on that, but lead acid isn't. It has a place. And actually, what's interesting is even with EV technology, the value add there is it's an independent technology, right? It's almost like adding redundancy, right? Like it's similar to what we do on a daily basis in the data center. And it has the same type of capabilities and outputs, right? We need to tailor that chemistry and that life cycle process to it. And really what's happening is you're starting to see that playing field level out a bit, right? There was a discernible value add to lithium ion, and lead acid is in a short run behind it from a cycle time perspective. But we see that being that playing field becoming a little bit more level. And
Yep.
now that's today, right? And then tomorrow they'll develop the next lithium type of product that's a little bit safer, whatever. But that's the course of action, right? How much do we change the chemistry, and where can we take it?
I actually can appreciate, changing from a consumer. Speaking as Nathan Trail, the consumer of a battery has just always been there. I take advantage of it. I just assume this is what's needed to power certain things like my remote control car or
Yeah.
my car or my cell phone or, a lamp or a flashlight. But changing the concept to its energy storage really kind of opens the box a little bit. I've been dabbling a little bit into kind of understanding the politics and long-term strategy around solar.
Yeah.
And as I dig into it, the federal government is moving more funding away from solar and more into energy storage.
Correct.
And it kind of opened up my eyes. I was like, wait a minute, batteries are actually almost more important now than what I'll call energy edge, kind of like at the edge, solar power, wind power, water power. Like all of those things are very important. But the storage of that energy is almost, if probably more important and complex, and is probably getting a lot more visibility from a macroeconomic perspective.
Mm-hmm.
they're shifting a lot of that funding, as I said, to battery storage versus just actual solar panels themselves. So I'm curious, as the world evolves, not just the technology and the industry, but as the macroeconomic situation evolves, what role does IT technology play in that for your
Yeah.
industry?
So that's a great question, and why do I say that is, the blurred lines between IT and OT, right? So is it an OT thing or is it an IT thing, right? Reality is it's going to be both. And right now, with whether it's lithium or whether it's lead acid, because that's now coming, because we have all these wonderful phone devices in our hand, all get data at our fingertips, even though we may not need it, right? Everybody wants it. It's a consumer demand. Battery management software, right? This is kind of where we're at. And that's going to have an integral part. You're going to see both players. You're going to see folks from IT, folks from OT. There's a specific barrier, which is in all cases, which is security, right? I was fortunate enough to speak on behalf of East Penn. White House had asked for input specific on what regulations had to go into place to ensure safety of our
Yeah.
battery management systems, and what does that look like. So I was fortunate to do that and participate in that. I'd love to say it's going to hit the market tomorrow, right? It is the government, and it's going to take a little bit of time. But I think the value add there was, and it was just East Penn was one of the players. There were three others that were there. I think we kind of gave our input, and really, I think that's where most time will be spent in that space. Why do I say that? Chemistry, not to say that that's not important, absolutely is, and it takes a long time to develop. Really, what it boils down to is, and if you ever wondered and you looked at phones or any product you have today, you're like, well, the battery lasts longer now, right? That's not the lithium ion. That's not the battery. It's the actual management software. It's the thing saying, oh, in the middle of the night, I'm not going to fully charge because it does it right. It starts to understand behavior
Right.
of the person and apply it, and how can I get the most longevity out of the life
Interesting.
cycle of the battery. And that's really where you're going to start to see a lot more competitive edge, right? Particularly in this space. Yeah.
Interesting. So when you arrived at East Penn, I know the company was facing some technical challenges, some technology challenges. Um, Versus today where you're still kind of in this positive momentum shift. How do you drive that transformation inside of a company that has 80 plus years of manufacturing history?
Yeah. So really where it started, right, was, I'll say, small, right? Because one of the things that they had to get acclimated to was change management, right? And that's a difficult task. So for 7 years, all I've been doing, right, talk about building relationships and influencing, right? That's where it kind of starts. So being a leader in IT, and particularly in the space I was in, and the challenges I was facing is, yeah, I need a lot of technical skills, right? That helped me along. I knew what the right answer was potentially with my team and what they could deploy. But the answer was, how do I get them to buy into it? Right. Number one. And it wasn't about finance. It wasn't money driven. Like, oh, we're not going to spend $1 million on that. That wasn't the problem. Really what it was boiled down to, and when I look at success factors of projects, is, did they adopt it? And what was that adoption rate, right? Many years ago, I was on a SharePoint project. We had like a 26% adoption rate. Like, this is when it first came out, but in material. You know how much we put, like 400 and something thousand into this, and like we have 26% of people using it. Like, that was an utter failure. Like so you have to make sure you're, one, designing for what's needed, meaning, are they actually in the need and market space of this product? And secondly, really was, how do I handle that level of change management? Why is this okay or it's not? And we do a lot of custom code, right? I have uh, over 3 dozen programmers, right, on staff. And even them, like, how do I get them reinvigorated? Yeah, I know we've been working on this, but we need to work that, and really spin that. And that takes a lot of time and effort, right? It's not a fast pace, it's a slow roll. But what I realized was, once you kind of map that out, everyone started to get a little bit more acclimated, a little bit more adjusted, right? First cloud solution came in, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then it became easier. Now the ball was rolling. It was just, okay, what's new? What's exciting? What's the next win for them?
Yeah. And I think it's important. You talked about change management. I 100% agree with you. And I wish CIOs and IT decision makers would bake in business enablement into their project budgets. A lot of time that's the first line item that's struck out,
Yeah.
or just not even thought of. And we certainly have invested heavily into our business enablement practice and change management practice. And so anytime a large scale transformational project is on the cusp, it's almost as if, why waste your money if you're not going to enable the business to know how to use and manage the technological change? So it's I'm happy to hear you say that, just because I don't always hear that across CTOs and CIOs, and it's almost a forgotten piece that can be a decision maker between success and complacent technology. So the other area is with IT that I'm curious your perspective is how to move IT from a cost center to a value driver.
Yeah.
How do we move that shift of thought from we're just a data center with a bunch of racks to actually driving business value, revenue upticks, that type of stuff? So curious your perspective on that.
Yeah, and I went into East Penn even kind of doting that, almost that tagline, right? I don't want to say I use it as an anchor point, but I do refer to it a lot. We're looked at as nothing more than a consumer of income, right? Like we're any capital, right? Any operational cost, we're just there. But genuinely, that was part of our transformation effort, right? How do we be customer driven, customer focused? Because at the end of the day, whether anyone in IT in any facility that you're at, whether it be financial, manufacturing, doesn't matter. There's always someone else that can handle that role, right? So what are you bringing to the table that is different? What's your differentiator? It can't be service, right? From just well, I could deliver you a server, I could deliver networking. Like, okay, well, great. It's how intrinsic can you be, and then can you bring them along that journey? Kind of focusing a little bit back onto even the change management aspect. Once they got acclimated to it, right? They need to. Why? We just talked about 2030 not looking like today, right? AI is going to change that whole parameter. So if we're doing that, how do they accept that level of change? And can we be the steward of that? So really what the value add was starting to build more customer relations at East Penn, our internal customer, in addition to looking at and engaging with, from a business analyst perspective, right? Business analytics. How do we enable that business? How do we give them data, right, to make decisions, right? That's going to be a real driving factor. And what we were saying, we can bring you to market on that, right? Now you've changed the tide. We're involved in AI. We're making more powerful decisions with better data, right? Now that gives us a competitive advantage over our competition out there from a battery manufacturer. That will lead to change. That will lead to change in the business. And we are there. Yes, we're just one spoke in the wheel. However, though, we're an integral part of it now instead of just being an ancillary.
Yeah. And I think a lot of leaders in your position are trying to figure out the secret formula for breaking into, and it's not just the technology and strategy. It also goes back to kind of that cultural mindset from the C-suite, and the board of directors is shifting the view of who technology is for our company. It's not just, it's not just a cost center anymore. It's now something that we have to leverage to build our business. So it's important to understand the difference. Kind of going outside of the office for a bit. You have a lot of very interesting hobbies. One involving the FBI.
Yeah.
Another involving, is it World of Warcraft?
Yes, World of Warcraft. Yes.
And another involving putting out fires.
Yes.
So you're a man of so many talents. I don't even know where to start. But let's start with volunteer firefighting. Sure. You've been doing that for over 3 decades.
Yes.
So I'm curious how your experience as a volunteer firefighter influences how you lead in your professional role at work.
Yeah, no, there was definitely, if I had to pull one attribute, was really incident management.
Oh,
really in critical pathways, right? When you come to a decision point or you're just under pressure, what I learned was I started to relax, right? Everybody gets that panic phase. That didn't hit me as much, right? Having gone through, 36 years doing volunteer firefighting, et cetera, you learn to manage that stress, right? And learn to turn it, right? And focus. So really what I've used that is to, as a tool, right? In my suite of toolbox, whatever. I've used that to be able to manage whether it's a critical incident, cyber event, or just pressure, right, from upper management. We got to get stuff done. How do you turn that and make sure you're also communicating the right? So that means you need to be level headed, right? You're not just you're getting
yeah.
yelled up at the top. You don't want to deliver that down below, right? How do you shield your team? And that's going to be important. So I'd say that would be definitely one attribute I took over.
That's great. Yeah, and I can see now more and more hearing you speak how much of an asset you can be having all of these different levels of, you may not be an expert at anything, but because of your depth and your broadness of experience through various things such as firefighting, when teaching you how to be calm under pressure and how to make fast decisions that are critical decisions, very much come back to how you can be stronger as an IT and business leader. What about parallels? This is a fun one because I don't know anything about the World of Warcraft. And my understanding is you are a legend in the World of Warcraft. The planet or the atmosphere of this gaming platform. Are there parallels that you can take from World of Warcraft? And you've been playing for I don't know how many years,
Yeah.
10, 20, whatever it is. 20
Yeah.
years is
Yeah.
insane. That you can take from that gaming platform and your that kind of alternate reality that you kind of create and then take that into your leadership at East Penn.
Yeah, so you know what I and maybe selfishly lately, what I leveraged it for is right there is definitely obviously my generation of players in that game, right? But there's a younger audience, right? So really, when it puts you in this mindset, and you have voice chat, et cetera, right? Those types of things. We don't do video, but a lot of voice chat. What I realized it kind of kept me a little bit more grounded. So what is the market space going to look like? And I know this sounds ridiculous, but a lot of gamers, they're into tech. Some aren't. Don't get me wrong. It's not 100%, but even 50%. So how would you lead that individual? What I learned was, or what motivates them, right? Is it reward? Is it success? Like, or is it being part of the team, right? Or is it that camaraderie on voice? It actually gave me a human dynamic that I can bring back within my space, right? Within East Penn and IT, like how, because I have a younger workforce, right? We've grown substantially. We've actually tripled our size over the last 7 years, right? So that's a significant challenge, and so I think it got me a little bit more grounded in understanding, how do I communicate what's important and what motivates them.
Yeah, tripling in size is a pretty amazing stat.
Yeah,
To just that's in the manufacturing space for someone who's been doing it from 80 years, and then all of a sudden we have this boom is says a lot. That's pretty amazing. So let's move into some fast takes.
yeah,
I'll ask you a couple of questions. You can answer as quickly as you want. Quick answers. I know there's a couple I've plugged in here that you don't see.
okay.
So heads up. But here we go. All right. What is your favorite Star Wars character?
Favorite Star Wars character, probably Luke Skywalker.
Luke Skywalker. I
Yeah,
would probably say the same thing. I used to have blonde hair when I had hair, so I
yeah,
always fancied myself like a Luke or a back in our generation. So,
yeah.
one word that describes your leadership style.
So it would be a concerned expectation. I have
Oh, there you
expectations,
go.
but I really want to understand how that impacts their lives, right?
Mm,
am I out of focus and out of turn, or what I'm asking for is just not possible. So I want to be sensitive
yeah,
to that.
it's almost like a level of empathy. Almost like
Yeah,
empathy
absolutely.
is concerned expectations. That sounds like a new book that we should write.
Absolutely.
Not to be confused with great expectations. All right, next
Yeah.
question. What is the most underrated quality for technology leaders?
What's the most underrated quality? I would say communication.
Mm.
What I'm starting to see is more and more folks are ignoring that from and what I've found is if we get not to poach from any particular consulting firm, we found folks that do consulting, um, right? They have to have some level of engagement, right? Those soft skills are becoming a lot more important, and folks that are just coming maybe out of college and landing a job and not doing that kind of event, they're a little bit more sheltered. Having those soft skills is extremely important because I see technology, as digital maturity elevates in a company. Not to say you're doing less, but you're enabling more, which means there's a shared hand in that technology, right? Putting the
Yeah.
fingers at the keyboard. So you're going to need different skills, right, to manage them.
All right, last question. What would be your walk-up theme song?
Walk up theme song. Hmm. Walk up theme song. Somehow I feel like something with adversity, kind of like a Rocky theme, just
A
facing
Rocky,
over.
like
Yeah.
Eye of the Tiger?
Yeah, only because I think over the years, whether there's been adversity in my life or just challenges, right? You're not going to get there. You're not going to do this. I even had early on in my career, like, weren't you like a grease monkey before you came here? Like those type of things.
Yeah.
I use that really to empower myself, right? And
Mm.
overcome. So I love facing adversity. I love people underestimating me, right? That becomes one of my tools in the belt, right? That's an advantage.
Sure.
Underestimate, please. So yeah, so I think that would probably be the best. Yep.
And any theme song coming from a hero of the Philadelphia area, like Rocky, is very fitting, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But Mike, you've been awesome to have. Super cool conversation. I wish we could go longer. You got me intrigued on multiple things. And for the rest of you folks out there, this guy, his journey from traveling consultant to leading digital transformation at one of the world's largest battery manufacturers shows how diverse experience, technical depth, and commitment to service create authentic, true leadership. His story, it reminds us that the best leaders often take non-traditional paths and that the skills we build outside the office, in Mike's case, decades of emergency response, can be just as valuable as what we learned in it. So, thanks again, Mike.
Thanks.
Until next time, keep building, stay grounded, and lead with purpose.
Thank you very much.